The InSight Mars lander touched the surface of Mars for the first time on November 26, 2018. In the course of the nearly 4-year mission, NASA finally discovered what scientists had been looking for on Mars for so long. But what is it that researchers have wanted to know about Mars for so long? And what will this discovery change now? Are you curious? Then follow us now on this journey to the last secrets of the Red Planet. InSight's launch to a mission of the century. Mars probes and rovers have been many in the history of planetary exploration to date, but InSight was different. The unusual lander was designed and equipped like no probe before it. Scientists involved in the project eagerly watched the launch of the Atlas V rocket that would carry InSight into space. On May 5, 2018, the time had come, and the spacecraft lifted off from the Vandenberg Air Force Base and set out on its journey. At NASA, the launch of the mission was viewed with mixed emotions. At that point, more than half of the planned Mars missions had failed. Either they had never launched, or they had failed when they arrived on Mars. Millions were lost as a result, and no one knew what InSight's fate would be. InSight also began with a problem. A previous launch attempt was delayed for several months due to a vacuum leak in the size instrument. But all went well. In Earth orbit, InSight slowly detached from the rocket stages and then floated freely in space. The lander was in space for 6.5 months. The technical device covered 484 million kilometers until it entered the thin atmosphere of Mars, 125 kilometers above the surface on November 26, 2018. The probe, which weighed just 700 kilograms, hurtled through the atmosphere at almost 20,000 kilometers per hour, having to withstand temperatures of around 1,500 degrees Celsius. To ensure that the fine measuring instruments on board the probe and all the other expensive gimmicks could withstand this extreme stress, InSight was securely packed in a kind of protective cover. The probe covered the last few meters hanging from a parachute, and its own small rocket engines provided the necessary counter-thrust to let the probe land safely and softly on the Martian soil. As soon as it arrived, InSight began deploying its solar panels and taking initial measurements. Thus began some 4 years of exciting Mars exploration. Past Mars missions. InSight was the first high-power seismic measurement station on Mars. NASA had previously sent 2 other main missions to Mars equipped with seismometers. However, the technology of Viking 1 and Viking 2, which were launched in the 1970s, cannot be compared to the technical capabilities of InSight. Moreover, the Viking missions were quite a bust. The seismometer of Viking 1 did not work properly during the landing and could not be used at all. Viking 2 was able to take measurements, but the instruments were so poorly calibrated after landing that it has always remained unclear whether the probe's measurements were due to seismic activity or wind. InSight's mission and challenges. InSight was intended to make up for this failure of the Viking missions after many years. The probe's main objective was clearly to survey and explore the interior of Mars. For this purpose, the lander, which was about 1 meter high and 6 meters long, was equipped with a seismometer, a windscreen, and a highly mobile robotic arm. The necessary power was provided by the 2 solar panels that gave this probe its distinctive appearance. In addition to the seismic instruments, InSight had a complete small weather station on board and a robotic arm called the Mole, which the probe would use to dig deep into the Martian soil to take temperature measurements in the upper layers of rock. First data fascinated. Even during the landing approach, and with the solar panels still folded in, InSight began collecting data. At NASA, scientists and technicians alike were beside themselves. The lander picked up vibrations from Martian winds and, for the first time, filmed clouds of water ice passing directly overhead. Tapes of the sound of Mars have been thrilling millions of people on the web since the mission launch. The secret of seismic activity. Seismic signals are any vibrations or intrinsic sounds that a planet experiences or produces. Like Earth, Mars is not silent inside. Or at least we know that now, and thanks to InSight. Before, it was not so clear to scientists just how alive and active Mars still is inside. Today, The planet appears to be a desolate, rocky world with stunning rock formations, sweeping mountains and deep canyons, but traces of life or vegetation are completely absent, as is evidence of liquid water. There are several references to dried-up lakes and even entire oceans and river courses. But where has all the water gone if Mars was once a mild water world? In addition to monitoring seismic activity such as Mars quakes, InSight was designed to scan the interior of Mars. Over the months, a perfect map of the Martian interior emerged thanks to the recording of internal waves. On these interior maps, researchers hoped there should also be evidence of underground lakes or water deposits. But first, the scientists' main interest was the activity of the Martian quakes. InSight has recorded about 450 seismic tremors. These Mars quakes are usually very fine and uniform. The strongest of them have magnitudes of 4.0 to 5.0, although the vast majority of quakes stayed well below that. The sound of Mars's interior was surprising, as researchers detected tremors with a repetition frequency similar to the human heartbeat. It almost seemed as if Mars was more alive inside than scientists had previously thought. Each of these tremors also tells a unique story about Mars's geological activity and its ongoing evolution. As the fine waves travel through the Martian subsurface, they encounter different layers of rock, cavities, and strata within. Each of these layers interacts with the quake waves through its own vibrational patterns. Based on the changes that the frequency patterns undergo as they travel through the planet, researchers can find out details about the planet's internal composition and makeup. Lucky meteorite impact. The questions scientists have long sought answers to were whether Mars still has an active core in its interior, and why it evolved to become dust-dry and desolate today. By a lucky coincidence, both of these questions were answered. On the other side of Mars, a meteorite had hit and had caused vibrations, which went at once across the planet. These waves measured Mars virtually once in its entire cross-section, and thus finally provided scientists with the answer to the question of the core. Researchers were able to perceive for the first time that Mars does indeed have an active core. The surprise was that this core, which is about 1,830 kilometers wide, must be liquid throughout. Our Earth has a core of nearly solid iron, surrounded by liquid materials and a crust, creating an optimal, stable magnetic field that protects us from influences from the cosmos. Mars's weak magnetic field was almost certainly responsible for leaving the planet almost defenseless against the bombardment of solar particles and cosmic rays. The magnetic field specifically protects us from radiation from the sun. The magnetic field lines catch the myriads of particles that hit our planet daily from the sun and guide them along their course lines into a kind of protective bag. On Mars, this protection may never have been as well developed as it is here. Solar winds and radiation from space hit our neighboring planet much harder. The atmosphere probably became thinner and thinner, water escaped into space, retreated underground, or froze. If Mars really once was a world similar to Earth, it became desolate because of the lack of protection. In the course of the InSight mission, evidence actually also grew that Mars really was once a world with water, a mild climate, and perhaps plants or simple living things. Deep beneath the dusty surface of Mars, the Mars lander found evidence to support these theories. Measurements there showed another magnetic field 10 times stronger than scientists had previously thought. This ancient magnetic field, trapped in the rocks of Mars, provided evidence of a time when Mars had a denser atmosphere and possibly liquid water on its surface. The Song of Mars. While InSight was unraveling the seismic mysteries of Mars, the spacecraft encountered another unexpected sound inside. The mysterious hum that sounded almost like a ditty. After the heartbeats of Mars and the gentle whistling of the wind, it was now almost as if Mars was casually humming away. Astrogeologists describe this humming like a melody of Mars waiting to be understood by us. Compared to the barren and rocky surface, which has so far held few surprises except for endless landscapes and lots of rock, the sounds of the planet are a veritable treasure chest of new discoveries. No plates, but a crust. During its 4-year observing period, InSight's seismic experiment for interior structure surveyed nearly the entire interior of Mars. Like X-rays, the seismic waves ran through the planet and revealed, among other things, that Mars has no continental plates like Earth. Rather, the surface appears to resemble a single solid crust. Planetary scientists had long suspected this, and thanks to InSight, confirmation finally came. The crust turned out to be much thinner than expected, but regionally, it has 2 or even 3 sublayers. The thickness of the simple crust is usually around 20 kilometers. Where there are 2 or 3 sublayers, it is up to 37 kilometers thick. In addition to all these discoveries, InSight has studied Mars's volatile atmosphere, recorded hurricanes and real tornadoes, and collected thousands of data on wind speed and direction. Thanks to this information, scientists now have a comprehensive picture of the weather and climate on Mars. This data will, of course, be of paramount importance in preparing manned missions to Mars. Dwellings for humans, who will one day study Mars on the ground, must be optimally adapted to the weather conditions. No human being can survive on the planet for long outside a protected shelter. The harsh Martian climate was also felt by InSight. After surviving numerous sandstorms, so many deposits had formed that the solar panels were increasingly failing. After 4 successful mission years, the end came for InSight. The power supply was simply no longer sufficient. In December 2022, NASA announced the official end of the mission. NASA is the largest and most powerful space organization in the world. Time and time again, rumors abound that NASA has information about space and aliens that it does not want to share with the ordinary people of the world. Time and time again, whistleblowers have leaked suppressed images or made public statements about what is really going on at NASA. We have to ask ourselves, why are certain photos being hidden from the public? What explosive information do these photos contain? Stay tuned as we investigate these mysteries and uncover banned NASA files. From backyard to world organization. In 1958, NASA was founded as the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in a backyard office. The goal of the then insignificant organization was to oversee the US's just emerging space projects. A short time later, NASA became an official government agency. If the importance of space travel increases in the future, and if humans even colonize space, NASA's power will continue to grow. This all sounds fine and dandy so far, if it weren't for the rumors that NASA, as well as the US government, the Pentagon, and the CIA, are not entirely kosher. The rumors say that NASA was also founded from the beginning to pursue a cover-up policy against the quite normal population. In the late 1940s, a missile had crashed over Roswell in the US, described by eyewitnesses as a large, silver-colored flying disc, and quite a few eyewitnesses even claim to have seen 2 lifeless bodies of non-human entities being recovered at the site. During these times, sightings of aliens and UFOs increased. The government, as well as later the still young NASA, always claimed that these reports were hysteria or optical illusions, until secret informants appeared on the scene, claiming exactly the opposite. One prominent example is Donna Hare, a former NASA employee who allegedly retouched thousands of photos on behalf of the space agency. But let's get our own impression of what's really going on at NASA. Is NASA hiding something on Mars? We owe a lot to NASA, that much is clear. Without the US space program, we probably wouldn't know as much about the universe. We never would have seen fascinating images of cosmic nebulae, black holes, and quasars. But could it be that the agency has more information than it shares with the public? Maybe. We certainly can't judge images and impressions we may never have seen. We don't know what all NASA is keeping under wraps. These images, which have certainly become public, are among the points of contention between NASA's critics and the space agency's official spokespeople. Many of the images are from Mars. In part, this is simply because Mars is now the most studied and photographed celestial body outside of Earth. Humans are expected to land there with spaceships within the next decade and establish the first research stations and settlements on site. But is this really justifiable in view of these photos? In 2015, space enthusiasts discovered this circular formation on officially released images of the Martian surface. Which, well, did you guess? That's right. This formation reminds us somehow a little bit of the terrestrial Stonehenge, and accordingly, the almost circular arrangement of rocks got the name Marshenge. Besides the arrangement of the stones, the almost hexagonal appearing foundation of the monument is also surprising. On Earth, Stonehenge has been identified by scientists as a prehistoric stellar observatory. But what could this formation have served for? And above all, who built it there? It's all just coincidence, says NASA. These stones were formed there only by wind, weather, and erosion. But can we really be so sure? It's exactly this security with which NASA scientists repel each reference to the working of higher life forms outside of the Earth. Besides, NASA searches officially for exactly such traces. People are confused about this behavior of the space agency, and more doubts arise whether NASA does not play a gigantic confusion game around aliens on Mars or elsewhere. Until today, nobody knows who had the forces and also the mental ability thousands of years ago to establish structures like Stonehenge on Earth. So how will any Earthling know for sure who might have once lived on Mars, and if this formation is really just due to chance and erosion? Mars pyramids. Since the 1970s, NASA is said to have kept photos of Martian pyramids under wraps until they too leaked out. The number of pyramid-shaped structures on Mars is almost frightening. Not only, the pyramids photographed in the 1970s are astonishingly reminiscent of the phenomenal structures on Earth. NASA's Curiosity rover has also captured brand new images of pyramids. The Curiosity rover is a car-sized one that has been traveling in the Gale crater on the surface of Mars for more than 10 years to study rock formations. Actually, the main goal of this space robot is to study the climate on Mars and its geology. The Gale crater may have once been filled with water until Mars mysteriously dried up. Computer simulations have found that several million years ago, our neighboring planet was a water world with a mild climate and possibly life. So how do we, or better, NASA for sure, know that there was not also a higher civilization there, whose former structures are now buried under thick layers of Martian dust? Allegedly, the habitable period had not been sufficient in order to let develop life, according to terrestrial yardsticks. But exactly here the mistake could lie. Very probably we cannot compare the evolution on other planets with the development of life on Earth. Everything only optical illusions? When it comes to clearing up alien rumors on Mars, opponents of such theories like to bring up the example of the Martian face into play. This formation, discovered in the 1970s, resembles a human face. For decades, the image was the focus of speculation surrounding Martian humans. Then, the image was demystified in the present. The impression of a face was caused only by the play of light incidence and shadow, as well as a mental effect known as pareidolia. Pareidolia occurs when the brain suddenly sees things that resemble human structures in barren environments such as rock and boulder deserts. Then, impressions of faces and buildings suddenly appear in the rocks, and the Mars pyramids are also thought to be such illusions or miscalculations by the brain. The underground theory. As Mars geologists found more and more evidence that water on Mars might have retreated underground, some UFO enthusiasts and science fiction lovers developed the theory that creatures still living on Mars today might have retreated underground as well. To be sure, even renowned researchers admit that the Martian subsurface could be a possible habitable environment for settlers in the future. However, this is far from speculations that there are already underground settlements of an unknown civilization on Mars. Further evidence for the underground theory is said to be this photo. This rectangular door was discovered by the Mars rover Curiosity in a rock formation. The resemblance to a gateway or portal into underground rock worlds or cities as we know them from Earth is really convincing. At this site, who can't imagine a Martian quickly disappearing underground to avoid prying eyes? If we take a look at the dimensions of the door, however, a slight doubt arises, even among the most die-hard alien friends. Because with only a little more than 30 centimeters in height, this gate is not much bigger than a XXL cat flap. If this is really a portal to an underground Martian city, Martians must be very small people. NASA keeps this secret about Apollo 11. Finally, let's move on to the photos and secrets that came from astronauts. A great mystery of space travel is the Apollo 11 mission, in whose astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon in the late 1960s. Since then, there have been rumors about what really happened on the moon. Already during the landing approach, there were problems because the contact to the two astronauts was interrupted for minutes. NASA almost thought they were lost, but then Armstrong and Aldrin reappeared. Instead of landing on a flat part of the moon, the two had to land their Eagle landing capsule on a very rugged part of the moon. This phase of the flight was not televised, nor did NASA acknowledge the faux pas after the mission. But far stranger things are said to have happened on the lunar flight. Armstrong is reported to have said verbatim, "These babies are huge, sir. Enormous. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you. There are other spacecraft out there lined up on the edge of the crater, watching us." Bender went public with his information after he resigned from NASA. NASA denied, and at best labels people like Bender or Donna Hare as blowhards or disgruntled ex-subcontractors who wanted to get back at NASA by going public. But for the most part, people at NASA simply remain silent. The organization can afford to do so because it's accountable to no one but the US government and other governments and space agencies involved in its projects. In the nearly 50 years since the moon landing, again and again, sensational statements of Armstrong and Aldrin in private circles about sightings of extraterrestrials and speech prohibition imposed on the part of NASA have apparently been expressed. Therefore, the report about a bizarre finding after Armstrong's death in 2012 caused a sensation. The most famous astronaut of all time had apparently kept some suspicious objects from the Apollo mission in a casket in his closet, and not even Armstrong's wife knew about these things. As for what was leaked, it was claimed to be a photo camera and some smaller technical parts of the Eagle landing capsule. A fierce wave of speculation has again broken out about whether there was still film in the camera and what these photos might have shown. What did Ivon Vagner photograph? Russian cosmonaut Ivon Vagner was on the International Space Station, ISS, in 2020. While there, he filmed a series of 5 lights, which he spontaneously referred to as visitors. Unofficially, information is being traded that unknown flying objects are constantly appearing around the ISS. And once again, astronauts are said to have taken a vow of silence about these things before they are even approved for the programs. The term visitor is supposedly as normal for astronauts on the ISS as it is for us on Earth. Except in this case, the visitors are not people or a neighbor's cat. Vagner posted the photo on social media, commenting that he had reported his discovery to the Russian Space Agency. They classified the incident as interesting, but that was it. What do you think these astronauts really saw? And were there living creatures on Mars that are being kept from us? And if so, why? Two mysterious objects have entered our solar system in quick succession, causing chaos. To date, only one of these visitors has been clearly identified. The other remains a mystery and may even be a threat that is difficult to assess. But what is so unusual about these objects? And why could one of the two strange visitors even put us into great danger? We're investigating the matter. Stay tuned and join us for a look at the most amazing discoveries of the last decade. Never-before-seen objects. We know of many objects in our solar system that are not planets or moons. These include smaller celestial bodies, such as asteroids, comets, and even meteorites. These objects all have one thing in common. They fly on relatively irregular courses through the solar system and can become thereby a danger. However, these objects originate without exception from our solar system. There are even exciting relics of the earliest hours of our solar system. When in a fast-rotating dust disk our star was born, mass potentials were formed, from which later planets were born, and some parts of matter also simply remained. These objects we know today as asteroids or comets. They are bundled in an asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, and in the outer edge of the solar system in the Kuiper Belt. Every now and then, an asteroid or comet shears off and then flies towards the sun. It's probable that gravitational shifts between the planets and the Sun are to blame for this. These objects can become a hazard if they get on a collision course with Earth. For this reason, NASA and other space agencies are constantly monitoring the cosmos around Earth and throughout the solar system. Huge telescopes do nothing but protect us every day. They try to detect every object around the Earth, no matter how small, and determine the orbit and the origin of the object. The astronomers were actually sure they had the situation pretty well under control, but then something shocking happened. Ouma Mua. On October 19, 2017, the Pan-STARRS Space Observatory in Hawaii reported finding an asteroid that had narrowly missed Earth. The shock was great because the object had only been discovered after it had already passed Earth. If the chunk had been on a collision course, we might have been unaware of it, and the impact would have hit us as if on a dead run. With an estimated size of 1,000 meters, the supposed asteroid would have been big enough to cause widespread devastation and possibly even to trigger a global catastrophe. This shock was not yet digested properly, and the peculiarities began to go further already. The object that had passed so close to us could not be traced to an orbit that led into the Kuiper or asteroid belts. This part was also traveling much too fast for an asteroid. Calculations showed that the object had come to us from outside the solar system, making it the first interstellar object ever recorded and observed by humans to visit us. The shocks about this object did not stop there, because what was it? Where did it come from? And was there any danger from this thing? The object was given the Hawaiian name Ouma Mua, which means first messenger from an alien world. Borisov. On August 30th, 2019, Gennady Borisov, a Russian engineer and amateur astronomer, was looking into the twilight of the night over Crimea. While doing so, he noticed a moving object that resembled a comet, but was moving in a very unusual way. The direction of motion was opposite to the usual trajectory of comets from the main asteroid belt. Borisov's curiosity was aroused, and a little later scientists were faced with the second sensation. Comet Borisov had also clearly come from outside the solar system. Thus, Borisov was the second object which had penetrated from outside into our solar system. However, the Borisov object made it much easier for scientists than Ouma Mua. The flying lump of rock was quickly and reliably identified as a comet. Comets, unlike asteroids, are composed of organic matter and often polluted water ice. They release dust and fine ice particles into the environment, forming the comet's distinctive tails. Nevertheless, Borisov remains a source of fascination. This comet had come to us from an alien solar system, or after a long journey through the infinite reaches of the cosmos. It could be the relic of an ancient star-forming region, come from a star system millions of light years away, or be a messenger from a neighboring world. We don't know at this time, but because Borisov is made of organic materials, it could give us clues about water elsewhere in space, or it could even piggyback on bacteria or microbes from another world. Borisov's orbit is currently being monitored, and who knows, maybe in the coming years, there will be a probe that flies to the comet to study it more closely, much like Rosetta Philae, the ESA probe that landed on Comet Chury-Gerasimenko in 2004. One thing is already clear at this point: Borisov poses no danger to us. However, the situation is completely different with the object that was discovered in Hawaii. The Mystery of Ouma Mua. The orbit calculation had quickly revealed to the scientists that the object with the name Ouma Mua originates from Vega, an alien star 147 trillion miles away. Initial measurements of Ouma Mua had yielded confusing data. At times, it was shaped like a cigar, and at other times, it appeared disc-shaped. At its longest diameter, the object measured about 1,000 meters. That's not very large for a comet or an asteroid, but would be enough to really cause trouble in an impact. Ouma Mua could destroy a major city. In particular, the speed makes this object a mystery and a threat, as Ouma Mua races through space at an incredible 95,000 kilometers per second, much faster than any known comet or asteroid. Next, the object's unusual flight behavior set astronomers on edge. When it had already passed our sun, it made a sharp turn and accelerated in a completely different direction. It almost seemed as if Ouma Mua had a will of its own, or as if the object was being steered in some mysterious way. Asteroids or comets move along fixed lines that have to do with the gravitational pull of the planets, the sun, and their interactions with each other. Therefore, the orbit's velocities and collision probabilities can be predicted very well and safely by scientists. An object that is hurtling, and moreover, hooks in ways that are unpredictable, poses a danger that is difficult to assess. Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb was the first to suggest that it might be an artificial structure created by an intelligent extraterrestrial civilization. Before Loeb, hardly anyone had the courage to say what everyone thought, for the rules of physics could not explain Ouma Mua. In fact, an artificial origin would best explain the object's many peculiar properties. Ouma Mua approached Earth once again and has been moving away from the solar system again since late October 2017, and has been heading toward the Pegasus constellation ever since. All attempts to close in on Ouma Mua and unlock its mysteries have strangely failed. Surveys yielded confusing data, and attempts to figure out the object's composition also yielded data that didn't quite fit the picture. The object itself emitted no light and reflected almost no sunlight. According to this, Ouma Mua would have to be made of a type of rock that absorbs light almost completely. But color scans showed that Ouma Mua must be dark red to brownish. This is true only for some objects in the Kuiper Belt. But those are colored reddish by dust, and Ouma Mua did not give off a speck of dust. The surface appeared rough and yet almost artificially polished. Scans had also revealed that Ouma Mua's interior must be made of unknown compositions of metal. A new study suggests that it could be an alien spacecraft with a light sail. But what could extraterrestrials want with us? And that too, when they are more than 300,000 light-years flight time away from us. The Vega system. Vega is a very bright star, which is only 25 light-years away from Earth. Alternating with some other stars every few thousand years, Vega becomes our northern star, or in other words, the star which appears most northern in the firmament. For this reason, we call this star the past and future of the North Star. These shifts occur because the Earth's axis wobbles over a period of 26,000 years, so our perception of north gradually shifts to different stars. Vega was the North Star many millennia ago, and it will resume that position in about 12,000 years. In early 2013, astronomers discovered an asteroid belt surrounding Vega, suggesting the presence of exoplanets in the Vega system. Studies of the system show that there are two regions around Vega from which Ouma Mua could have originated if it is a natural object. An outer region contains icy asteroids and comets, and an inner asteroid ring contains warmer space rocks. However, if the theory that Ouma Mua is an object that did not form naturally is correct, we must ask, then what is it? A probe? There would be a theoretical possibility, but all attempts to contact the object failed. A probe would have to emit, according to our understanding, some kind of signal or electronic radiation, but neither was the case. We don't know whether we're possibly dealing with a technology, since we don't currently know how probes of other civilizations might function. In this case, the question would further arise whether Ouma Mua could have been sent with a malicious intent. We certainly cannot rule it out completely. However, calculations have shown that Ouma Mua was on its way to us for about 300,000 years. If an extraterrestrial nation had sent the probe to explicitly spy on our solar system, these species would either be very long-lived, or the endeavor would make little sense. Of course, it's also conceivable that Ouma Mua was and is a probe, or other technical device similar to our Voyager probes. After its actual mission goal, the probe flew on and on. Just as Voyager 1 and 2 will reach first neighboring star systems in many thousands of years, Ouma Mua has just appeared with us now. Whether or whenever aliens will catch sight of our probes, they will find a golden disk inside each of the Voyagers, which gives information about what the probes are and who sent them. Maybe Ouma Mua had something like that on board, only we didn't find it because we weren't able to capture and examine the object. Ouma Mua was the first visitor from an alien world, and now it slowly disappears again from the solar system. At its current position far behind Neptune, it's no longer visible to our telescopes. Will we now never know what Ouma Mua really is? Or will the object possibly return? Join us now as we share the latest findings surrounding this event of the century. The Mystery of Ouma Mua. It doesn't happen every day. In 2017, the Pan-STARRS Space Telescope in Hawaii sighted an object that no one had ever seen before. Ouma Mua was initially thought to be an asteroid that narrowly missed Earth. Then, it quickly became clear that this object had come to us from interstellar space, making it the first craft of its kind. For 11 days, the alien kept the world of science on tenterhooks. Then, Ouma Mua moved away at breakneck speed, without researchers really managing to unravel its mystery. Now, Ouma Mua is gone. It has passed beyond Neptune's orbit and is so far away that no telescope will ever be able to study it again. Ouma Mua emits no light at all and also reflects light very poorly, making the object hard to spot at this distance. Because of its small size of just under 1,000 meters, its strange shape, and its furious speed, even our best telescopes cannot detect the stranger so far out in space. The last investigations had shown that the new orbit will carry the strangest celestial body of all time, directly in the direction of the constellation Pegasus, or Ouma Mua will hit a snag and come back again. Such an unusual, and for an ordinary asteroid or comet, completely impossible maneuver, Ouma Mua had already shown once, shortly after it had passed the Sun. Ouma Mua first braked, then turned in a sharp angle, accelerated, and came back towards us. This strange behavior cannot be explained until today. The origin of the object and its true nature remain a scientific question around which a fierce dispute has broken out. Is Ouma Mua a fragment of a celestial body, such as a planet or a moon, that was hurled towards us from a distant star system? Or is it a piece of alien technology that was sent to our solar system, either accidentally or intentionally? Scientists found plausible explanations for both theories, and we'll look at them now. Not an asteroid and not a comet? Ouma Mua's unusual nature makes it impossible to classify the object unambiguously as a comet, an asteroid, or anything artificial. However, it would be important to know what this piece was. Among other things, 6 new objects that allegedly have similarities with Ouma Mua should provide information. Among the most extraordinary capabilities of the unknown is undoubtedly its unusual ability to accelerate. Asteroids and comets accelerate through chemical processes or the interaction of gravitational forces in space. The acceleration rates can be explained and understood with the formulas of physics, but not so with Ouma Mua. Information about the true nature of Ouma Mua could be provided by a completely new category of celestial bodies called Dark Comets. Facts about Ouma Mua. For all of you who don't know Ouma Mua yet, we now share the most important facts again. Ouma Mua was initially named A/2017 U1 or C/2017 U1 Pan-STARRS. The object was discovered on October 19, 2017 by the Haleakala Observatory in Hawaii. The Pan-STARRS project uses the telescope to protect Earth from asteroids. After it was clear that the object came to us from interstellar space, it was then given the name 1/Ouma Mua. The 1 and / combinations stand for the first recognized interstellar object to enter our solar system, and Ouma Mua means first scout from an alien world. The size between 100 and 1,000 meters fit first to an asteroid. The form, however, not so much. Sometimes it appeared as an elongated cigar, then more like a flat disc. Its trajectory and speed made it clear that this object was different from anything that had come before. Probably in truth, Ouma Mua is not the first interstellar object to speed through our solar system, as there are potentially billions of possible objects that also did the same thing. It's just that we humans didn't notice these objects in the past, or we simply did not have the technology necessary to do so. Even normal asteroids are extremely difficult to spot, as they do not emit any light themselves, and depending on the material, can absorb all the light that hits them. Comets, on the other hand, are usually brightly glowing objects that can often be seen with the naked eye from Earth when they are in a near-Earth orbit. When Ouma Mua was discovered, it had already sped past Earth and was about level with the Sun. Then, Ouma Mua suddenly accelerated by about 17 meters per second. This seems small, but this kind of acceleration violates all known laws of physics. In any case, it was enough to cause a stir in the world of science. In physics, objects can only accelerate and change their trajectory as drastically as Ouma Mua did when pushed. And so, scientists began to seek explanations for the pushing force. Some initial hypotheses that solar winds pushed the object were quickly discarded. The force exerted by solar particles is not enough to explain Ouma Mua's acceleration, assuming it was some kind of rock. Even the best photos of Ouma Mua showed only a tiny speck, giving little indication of what the object is really made of or what it looks like. Most theories about its shape came from the variations in its light curve, whose brightness rose and fell uniformly as Ouma Mua traveled around the sun. The results were absolutely not in favor of a round object, but rather showed alternating evidence for an irregularly shaped object such as a disk or a cigar. Dispute about Ouma Mua. Scientists searched strenuously for comparable examples of accelerating objects in our solar system and came up with comets. As comets approach the sun, the ice within them heats up, sublimates, turns to gas, and sputters out of the comet's main body. This ejection of gas and dust forms the comet's characteristic tail and gives the comet a small thrust, acting like a small thruster on the side closest to the sun. Comets are thus accelerated away from the heat source. Around Ouma Mua, however, no evaporation such as ice, dust, and gas could be seen. These evaporations would have also made Ouma Mua more visible. The absence of this similarity to known objects led to more exotic theories. The first theory came from Harvard professor Avi Loeb. Loeb was the first to proclaim Ouma Mua could represent extraterrestrial technology. He argued in 2018 that solar winds could provide the acceleration observed at Ouma Mua, but only if it was actually much thinner than scientists originally assumed. By thin, Loeb suggests somewhere between 0.3 and 0.9 millimeters thin. Since a 1,000 meter long, 1 millimeter thin object is unlikely in nature, Loeb argued that it must be artificial, a light sail created to capture solar winds and use them to accelerate from one star to another. This theory met resistance from other members of the academic community. Daryl Seligman, a theorist and postdoctoral researcher at Cornell University, countered in 2020 with a study that found that perhaps no outgassing of Ouma Mua was detected because it was emitting an invisible gas like hydrogen. This would not have been detectable with telescopes pointed at Ouma Mua. Seligman suggested that Ouma Mua was composed entirely or mostly of such hydrogen, a hydrogen iceberg that sublimated thanks to the sun's heat, and this sublimation produced the thrust. Loeb and Seligman got into an argument. A few months later, Loeb published another paper challenging the other theory and asking where exactly this hydrogen iceberg could have come from. He showed mathematically that starlight in interstellar space is warm enough to melt any hydrogen iceberg that would have formed in the nearest dense molecular clouds before it came anywhere near our solar system. Loeb was still convinced that an extraterrestrial technology explanation was most likely. Seligman revised his hydrogen iceberg theory, but maintained that Ouma Mua had been moved by escaping pure hydrogen gas. Seligman eventually found support from Jennifer Bergner. In 2023, the assistant professor at the University of California found evidence in the laboratory that his hydrogen thrust theory was correct. The two wrote a paper arguing that Ouma Mua was a whole new category of celestial object, a quote-unquote dark comet. Their new explanation took into account Ouma Mua's acceleration and also its lack of dust, since dark comets need not emit dust. These objects create their propulsion by reconfiguring hydrogen structures inside. Avi Loeb was not convinced and wrote 2 new papers on the subject himself, accusing Seligman of bad mathematics and continuing to push his extraterrestrial spaceship model. Seligman was then already busy searching for proof of his theories and looking for clues to other dark comets. Together with Bergner and some other comrades in arms, he combed through data of objects that had already been registered in our solar system but could not be explained. 6 dark comets. In fact, the research team found 6 objects that fit the criteria. 6 objects that showed non-gravitational, non-solar wind acceleration that could not be explained by any known mechanism. These objects were small, some measured as little as 3 meters. They looked like asteroids, were near-Earth objects, and showed no special features except for the strange acceleration. Until now, these accelerations had not been noticed because the rates were very small due to the small size of the objects, and the strange behavior was not noticed at all. It wasn't until Seligman and his colleague specifically looked for these rates that the candidates stood out. These objects do not flit from planet to planet through the solar system like Ouma Mua. They are also not interstellar objects, but they resemble Ouma Mua and could allow conclusions about its true nature. In 2031, a Japanese probe is expected to study these strange near-Earth objects and even collect some of them and bring them to Earth to study. Perhaps then, Seligman can look forward to a late triumph, but for that long, he will be no more able to prove his theory than Loeb. With Ouma Mua now far beyond our reach, we may never know. All attempts to quickly construct a probe that could still catch up with Ouma Mua failed. Of course, it could end up that neither theory is correct. The longer and deeper we explore the universe, the more we encounter strange and unexpected phenomena, and the more we will learn. Maybe one day more objects like Ouma Mua will appear in our solar system, and we will find a conclusive explanation for the phenomenon. From the 1960s to the 1980s, the Soviet Union landed on Venus with some technically excellent probes. No nation has studied this enigmatic planet as well as the former Soviet Union, and it can be assumed that nobody knows so well about the planet until today. Neil deGrasse Tyson, a renowned astrophysicist and science communicator, has recently worriedly pointed out that the Soviet Union may have withheld explosive information about Venus, and a study by a Russian researcher shocked with statements about finding aliens on Venus. But what is this all about? Did the Soviets really withhold scientific information on a grand scale? And did they really know of the existence of aliens on Venus? Stay tuned as we explore these explosive questions now. Neil deGrasse Tyson warns. Neil deGrasse Tyson is one of the best-known astrophysicists in the United States and a major science communicator. Recently, he has pointed out the importance of the Soviet missions to Venus, and for a very specific reason. Many of the accomplishments that the Soviet Union achieved in space exploration were proudly shared with the public at the time. The contributions to Venus research are still considered revolutionary today, and arguably no other nation has contributed as much to our understanding of Venus as Russia. However, it is actually obvious that the former Soviet Union was far from sharing all the information with Western scientists during the Cold War. Some of the achievements may also have been less well known and may be of renewed interest today. Others may have been overlooked or deliberately suppressed. Tyson cautioned in careful terms not to forget anything about the Soviets' Venus research when it comes to planning new missions to our neighboring planet. Shockingly, a new study from Russia proves just that. Allegedly, video footage from the Venera 13 probe even shows aliens. NASA wants to return to Venus. After a recent discovery of possible life on the planet, NASA has renewed a focus on exploring Venus. Before that, it had long been quiet about our inhospitable neighboring planet. After the biomarker phosphine was detected in Venus's atmosphere, NASA set up a new research program. Similar to Mars, computer simulations showed that Venus may have had a period in its evolution when it had a mild climate, possibly water, and even simple forms of life. Just as with Mars, changes then occurred that swept away this life and made Venus one of the most uncomfortable places in the solar system. Our home planet may also be facing changes that will make life increasingly difficult. Learning more about the processes that have caused desolation on Mars and Venus could tell us much more about our own fate, and we may even be able to avert it. Da Vinci Plus, the Deep Atmosphere Venus Investigation of Noble Gases, Chemistry, and Imaging Plus mission, is designed to penetrate Venus's atmosphere, which is 90 times denser than that of Earth. The samples and data collected will help scientists determine how Venus has evolved, whether it has ever had oceans, and whether traces of microbes can be found in the atmosphere. Da Vinci Plus is accompanied by Veritas, or more specifically, the Venus Emissivity, Radioscience, INSAR, Topography, and Spectroscopy mission. The mission will produce a detailed map of the planet's surface and attempt to reconstruct the geologic history of Venus. Each of NASA's 2 new Venus missions has been given a budget of $500 million. These missions will study the planet's atmosphere and geological features. The decision to again send missions to Venus marks a significant change in strategy for NASA, which has focused primarily on Mars in recent decades. According to NASA Solar System Exploration, more than 40 spacecraft have visited Venus to date. NASA's last mission to Venus was the Magellan mission, which was launched in 1990 and spent 4 years collecting data, resulting in the first mapping of the planet's surface. At the present moment, only 1 spacecraft is in orbit around the planet. Akatsuki from Japan is an orbiter that has been taking measurements around Venus since 2010. So far, this orbiter has not found any traces of life. However, the probe has also launched with some mishaps and has never reached the position originally intended for the mission. It also launched before the phosphine findings became known. Venus in the 1960s. In the 1960s, Venus was an enigmatic and challenging planet in NASA's eyes. Their records referred to it as a hell planet. Conditions on this planet are truly extreme and hostile to life. With temperatures high enough to melt lead and a dense, toxic atmosphere, Venus has always been a difficult target for space exploration. While NASA viewed Venus as challenging and mysterious, Venus became the Soviet Union's favored target. NASA, on the other hand, focused first on the Moon and then on Mars. The red planet, with its Earth-like topography and evidence of flowing water in the past, was considered the most likely place for extraterrestrial life in the solar system. By the 1960s, the space exploration race was in full swing, and both superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, were determined to be the first to reach and explore alien planets. For the US, the decision to set Mars as the primary target was not only scientifically motivated, it was also a symbol of the Cold War, in which the US and the Soviet Union were in a race for technological superiority and geopolitical dominance. As the red planet, Mars was somehow also a sign of communist systems and for socialism. If NASA were the first to land a probe there, it would have symbolically captured the planet of the Eastern Bloc. While the US targeted Mars, the Soviet Union chose to focus its resources on Venus, creating an interesting contrast in the 2 nations' space goals. The Soviets accepted the challenge. Initially then, the Soviet Union was not at all entirely voluntarily determined to send missions to Venus. Nevertheless, the nation's engineers and scientists accepted the challenge, and they were to meet it so brilliantly that to this day, the US can only tip its hat to the ingenuity, the technological advances, and ultimately the successes. Venus offered the Soviet Union the opportunity to demonstrate technological superiority, and it did just that. It was not until much later that wild speculation arose about the true Soviet intentions. Allegedly, the Soviet Union was obsessed with Venus and intended to use its surface as a military base or to colonize the planet. Officially, the Soviet Union only sent some of the most successful probes ever to Venus. Of the nearly 30 missions, many went wrong. Probes landed in the wrong places, cameras didn't work, and other mishaps occurred. But the Soviet Union was tough, didn't let itself be put off by any failure, and continued on its course. Almost annually, probes were launched to Venus, sometimes even 2 per year, and with each launch, the probes became more successful. The Venera missions lasted from 1961 to 1983. The Soviets launched a total of 28 spacecraft to explore the planet, with 13 entering Venus's atmosphere and 8 landing successfully. Launching on February 12, 1961, Venera 1 was the first mission to attempt to fly past Venus. Unfortunately, the probe's telemetry failed 7 days after launch. It's believed that it approached Venus to within 100,000 kilometers and then simply flew past. Venera 3 became famous in 1966 as the first man-made object to impact another planet. Although it landed on Venus on March 1, 1966, no data could be sampled from Venus's atmosphere due to a failure of the measuring instruments. On October 18, 1967, Venera 4 made up for it and became the first spacecraft to measure the atmosphere of another planet. It revealed that the main gas in Venus's atmosphere is CO2. Venera 5 and 6 were specifically designed as atmospheric probes. In 1969, they each collected 53 and 51 minutes of data, respectively, while slowly descending through the atmosphere with a parachute. Venera 9 had June 8, 1975 to thank for the first images of the surface of another planet. The first sound recordings on another planet were provided by Venera 13 in 1981. And not only that, among the mission's accomplishments to this day are the best and most beautiful images of the surface of Venus. Around the Venera 13 mission, speculations arose again in the last years. Dr. Leonid Sanfilmalaity, a renowned researcher of the Space Research Institute of the Russian Academy of Sciences, has identified several objects resembling living beings on never-published images of this mission. His research and discoveries regarding Venus and the Venera missions have once again caused quite a stir in the scientific community. The researcher described three main objects that could not be explained. One was a disc-shaped entity that seemed to respond to changes in temperature or pressure. The second object resembled a black lobe that was visible for the first 13 minutes of the mission. Closer inspection revealed it to be a vertically elongated black object with an unknown appearance. Surprisingly, the black object disappeared from the images taken in the 27th and 36th minutes of Venera 13's landing approach. The most intriguing discovery was an alien scorpion sighted in the 90th minute of the mission. The origin of the scorpion is unknown, possibly extraterrestrial or astrobiological in nature. Secrets of the Soviet Union. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 affected far more than just the country itself. This change led to a profound geopolitical transformation, but it also left a legacy of mystery and speculation. The Soviet Union was known for its secrecy and advanced intelligence operations. This very culture of secrecy also has led to numerous theories and speculations surrounding secret findings of space travel. It has been repeatedly claimed that the Soviet Union may have possessed information about contacts with extraterrestrials, and the new studies on the forgotten data from the Venera 13 mission seem to support such thoughts. There were also always rumors that there was a secret airbase in the Soviet Union where extraterrestrials landed, similar to Area 51 in the USA, but there is still no concrete evidence for this. What do you think about the new study from Russia? Do you think there is mysterious life on Venus that we may now discover? Dark matter is one of the most mysterious phenomena in the universe. Scientists assume that it's one of the fundamental building blocks of the universe, but it's neither visible nor measurable. Now it turns out that dark matter is not just a filler of the universe and is involved in the formation of black holes. Dark matter may have formed fascinating stars in the early days of the universe that shone brighter than any stars known today. Come with us on this journey to the threshold of the universe and to what may be an entirely new kind of star. What was in the beginning? The James Webb Space Telescope is designed to illuminate the mysterious early era of the universe. At the very beginning of the telescope's operational life, we were in for a surprise. An image taken deep into space revealed very old galaxies that were far brighter and more regular than they should have been at that early date. Since then, scientists have puzzled over the true nature of this phenomenon. In order to know how stars and the first celestial bodies such as planets or even gas clouds and rocks in the cosmos really evolved, we would have to find the oldest representatives. With the James Webb Telescope, this is theoretically possible, but only if the cosmos is really 13.8 billion years old as assumed so far. If the universe is possibly much older, also James Webb would have to pass, because the mirrors of the super telescope can catch only light, which was on the way to us about 13.5 billion years. During this first epoch of the universe, there should not have been much older light than that, according to the previous opinions of scientists. Only when the first stars from fast-rotating gas and dust disks developed, it became light. Researchers would like to find only too gladly some of these very old and first stars. A completely new type of star? Right now, it looks like researchers may have found a type of star they never thought possible. Einstein was able to predict the existence of black holes because the probability of the existence of such objects was apparent in his equations for relativity in the cosmos. It was not until about 40 years later that these mysterious objects were actually discovered in space. Currently, researchers believe a type of star is possible that no human has ever calculated or predicted. a star powered by dark matter that shines as brightly as an entire galaxy. So, of course, we can wonder how scientists are now coming up with this idea. In fact, the mysterious existence of the giant galaxies during the cosmic dawn could also be explained by the fact that these light spots are not galaxies at all, but single, extremely brightly shining superstars. The oldest light of the universe? In April 2023, an article appeared in Nature Astronomy which describes 4 highly interesting objects in more detail. More precisely, they are galaxy candidates named JADES-GS-C10-0 to JADES-GS-Z13-0. They are galaxy candidates because researchers assume they are galaxies, but they can't be completely sure at that distance. At first sight, these galaxies don't look very impressive, but here you can see some of the oldest objects ever seen in the universe. The Z value at the end of the name indicates how far away the galaxy is from us. Z10 is closer than Z12, and Z13 is the most distant and therefore probably the oldest light source. They were discovered as part of the JWST Advanced Deep Extragalactic Survey, or JADES for short. JADES has set itself to the task of studying the very first galaxies that formed in our universe. This is now possible for the very first time in human history because the JWST works with a completely new infrared technique, which makes it possible for the first time to study old and distant objects in detail. To determine age and distance, researchers measure the value of the red light shift. As light travels through expanding space, it expands. The spectrum shifts into the red region. The detailed analyses of red light that are now possible thanks to James Webb allow scientists to make more accurate statements than ever before. Dark stars on the cusp of time? If we look at these objects, we are looking at the cosmos as it looked about 400 million years after the Big Bang. Based on the brightness of these spots, it appears that these objects must be entire galaxies. However, measurements of the light frequencies have shown partly contradictory results. The values of mass and luminosity did not fit well into the picture. Just as improbable, it was according to previous theories that in this epoch of the universe, finished galaxies already existed. The problem of the almost impossible early galaxies had caused a lot of stir in the summer of 2022, and some scientists are convinced that these objects have what it takes to disprove the Big Bang theory. Other scientists take a more cautious view of the discovery. They believe that it's not possible to say for sure at a distance whether these are really galaxies. They could also be luminous accretion disks formed around supermassive black holes, or the images show an unknown form of early star. Furthermore, critics of galaxy theory argue that these images show objects from a time when the cosmos may have functioned very differently than it does today. We do not know which processes exactly led to the fact that from the dark cosmos a shining one began. This is where the exciting new theory of dark stars comes in. A star is normally born from a cloud of dust and gas when gravity overcomes the pressure exerted by the matter in that cloud. In an ordinary star like our Sun, the necessary pressure is caused by the nuclear fuel that balances gravity and inflates the star. But a dark star would be so massive that even the nuclear fire would not be enough to balance the gravity. Instead, the dark star is driven by something much more exotic: dark matter. Now, this theory has a small catch because researchers still don't know exactly what dark matter actually is. To explain the dark giant star theory, researchers introduced a theoretical particle, the WIMP. WIMPs could be a kind of heavy and only weakly interacting particle which collide in the center of an extremely massive star, there to compress each other so strongly that a huge amount of energy is released. Purely mathematically, this process would explain why a dark star is not compressed by its gravity. Nevertheless, a dark star would probably be very unstable and could only exist for a short time before exploding or collapsing. Further calculations have shown that such a dark matter star would not be truly dark. Rather, it could shine as brightly as an entire galaxy during its short lifespan. So, are we seeing such mysterious dark stars here, representing an entirely new category of stars? Or are they just darn old galaxies after all, calling the Big Bang theory into question? Scientists are currently struggling to come to terms with the JWST discoveries, and the uncertainties are driving the scientific community to ever new speculations and theories. What is really true, only the future and possibly an even better telescope than James Webb will show. Sense and nonsense of the research. In view of the new discoveries and the controversy that has now broken out in the academic world, the question arises once again, why it's actually so important to find out what happened in the early hours of the cosmos. Some people consider this research, and especially the sums invested in it, to be as excessive as the quarrels and disagreements of natural science. But if we look more closely, there is much more behind this research than being right or a contest among scientific disciplines. Physics seeks to understand the fundamental laws that govern our reality. Some of these laws are known to us, but we probably don't know all of them, because scientists still can't describe the entire universe and its formation 100% scientifically. The universe as we know it today is probably the result of billions of years of cosmological evolution. By studying its beginnings, we can understand the first moments after the Big Bang, which in turn helps us understand the forces and mechanisms that have shaped our current cosmological situation. Through this knowledge, we may one day begin to dominate matter. That this is not so improbable is shown by the studies of the Russian cosmologist Nikolai Kardashev. He had created a scale according to which intelligent species can develop so far that they dominate the universe. Super civilizations can create, form, and change matter. Natural science is a basic condition to arrive at realizations like these. In the vastness of the cosmos can be found answers to the urgent questions of the energy problem and space travel. This could be the case for medicine as well, and each and every one of us could benefit enormously if scientists unravel the mystery of matter. The discovery of new sources of energy or forces of nature could change everything in this world, just as scientific discoveries of the past have led people out of the Dark Ages. So, there is much more behind research than curiosity and scientific vanity. If we want to evolve, we need to know more about the universe and its true nature. In addition, this research also has an important philosophical and spiritual meaning. The question about the origin of the universe is closely connected with the question about our own origin and the meaning of our existence in this world. Even if at the moment quite chaos has broken out in cosmology, the scientists will overcome this uncertain time. Further findings will create new knowledge, and one day, we may have settled the question around the meaning of the universe. James Webb will accompany us for the next 20 years, and the sensations in which we were allowed to participate so far are only the beginning. So, we can already be curious here and now, which new fascinating discoveries James Webb will deliver and which theories will prove true in the end. Tell us now what you think about the revolution in science that James Webb has triggered. Are you following the developments with excitement? And what do you think is the truth about these brightly shining objects? Are they really galaxies or individual stars?